A very good afternoon and welcome to the third installment of this webinar series between the Mail and Guardian and, of course, the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung Institute. And we're looking really at the local government elections. We're now 2 days away from the elections. We've been exploring different topics that are really crucial to not just how South African voting patterns are going in terms of youth and gender, but also looking at how do we have a system that is more inclusive, that allows as many people as possible to participate, and where we're not seeing that participation, what are really some of the driving factors behind it. So this conversation takes place, like I was saying, literally 2 days before the elections, in the sense that we have the special voting this weekend, but on Monday we go to the polls. And our focus today is going to be on the accountability of municipalities. So are municipalities accountable? And to what extent does this then change the kind of decisions that citizens make at the polls? Joining us today, of course, I'm not the expert, but my guests certainly are. Let me welcome onto the platform Graham Robert Pote, who is the program manager at Rosa Luxemburg, Phumlani Majozi, who is a senior fellow at African Liberty, and he's a writer and commentator as well on economic and political issues, and Ayanda Khoza, who is he is with the Makana Activist Front. Good morning, not evening, but good morning to all of you gentlemen. A pleasure to be in conversation with you today. So as always, what I will do, I will give each of you an opportunity just to give us your opening statement and reflections on the topic for today before we get deep into the topic. And as always, for those who are joining this conversation as participants, if you look on the right side of your screen, you will see the chat. I'm more than happy for you to pop your questions, your comments as this conversation is going on in that chat box, and we'll certainly get our guests to explore further and just, to share ideas in terms of whatever questions it is that may be raised. So with that said, let me kick it off by inviting perhaps Graham, let me begin with you and give you an opportunity just to make 5 minutes and nothing more really of the opening statement in terms of your own reflections on today's theme.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Graham Pote. I'm joining from Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. I just want to say thanks very much to Mail and Guardian for hosting these discussions, and Cathy, thanks for moderating. I'll start by saying it appears that South Africa's governance structures are not responding to clear feedback that the South African state is being improperly managed. This issue of efficiency and accountability in all levels of government needs to be urgently addressed. South Africa is the least efficient and most expensive country in all of SADC to do business in. At the moment, we have fewer listings on the JSE than there were in 1994, and the JSE has a lower market capitalization than Tehran Stock Exchange. Our tax regime is growing stricter and trying to source more out of an already overburdened middle class who already have to self-provide healthcare, education, security, personal transport, and insurance, on top of tax rates which are comparable to Scandinavian countries. So what is it that we're paying for, and who is going to continue to pay for it while wealthy and middle-class people are leaving, along with big capital, again? We have protest, unrest, civil disobedience, campaigns like that of trade union solidarity to protest against tax abuse. We have feedback from community organizations. For example, one was organized last Friday in Komatipoort by a community organization, and Nkomazi municipality officials didn't show up or even respond to the invitation. And this is happening throughout the country, that governance just isn't responding to feedback. Elections as a feedback mechanism, which happen every 4 years, are too slow. We have to move faster. And I look forward to discussing the unemployed people's movement against the Makana municipality judgment later. But I would say that relying on the justice system as a means of holding government to account is costly, and we are just we're just seeing the result, as with the case against Jacob Zuma, with the respondents abusing legal procedure as a means of frustrating the justice system and evading accountability for as long as they can. So South Africa has moved away from being a participatory democracy where we have a working feedback mechanism between citizens and government to a dysfunctional state apparatus which is ignoring all the existing feedback. So I believe the question we should be asking is, why aren't governance structures accountable? And I think this question should be depoliticized and approached practically at a human level. So we should ask, why are civil servants not doing their jobs properly? South Africa's civil servants lack efficiency and accountability because of the complete lack of separation from party and politics, from public bodies, which are meant to serve the needs of the people. So instead, we have a civil service which is run by and will feed whichever party has the majority vote. This should be read into the state capture question, because positions in local and provincial government tend to go to people who are loyal to someone higher up, and what has resulted are huge pyramids of patronage. This problem is not endemic to an ANC-led government, because we do not have legal structures in place to prevent this situation, irrespective of which party leads. Aside from the problem of underqualified people in official positions, which also has to be considered next to the legacy of unjust education and an ineffective skill transfer into our new democracy, instead of qualified and accountable persons taking official positions, South Africa's politicized civil service of deployees instead of employees has led to improper appointments to official positions, and with them, corruption, opportunism, and a take advantage of your position while you can mentality. Because, viewed from a practical perspective, our countrywide civil service actually suffers from a lack of job security. In any workplace, you will not see efficiency and workmanship from employees if you are hiring people on the basis of political connections, nepotism, patronage. So, more so if the stability of any position is compromised by the possibility of a change of government every 4 years, or by insecurity if you are disloyal to an official who is above you. For South Africa to see effective service delivery and accountability in our governance structures, we need an independent civil service and a legislated separation of party and politics from the service delivery level. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Graham. And we're going to have an opportunity to, I think, dig a little bit deeper in terms of your own reflections on today's theme. Let me invite then our next panelist, who's going to be taking us through their own thoughts on today's conversation. Phumlani Majozi. Mr. Majozi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cathy. It's great to see you all. It's great to have this very important conversation we're having. I think Graham has touched on very important topics here, very important issues. And as he has highlighted in his intro, that is, we have lack of accountability in our municipalities. That's the reality we face in South Africa. Even the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, he recently admitted that our municipalities are a complete mess, and that's the challenge we face. And that highlights too that there is lack of accountability. When you look at, for example, look at Gauteng, when you look at what's been happening over the past months, you look at Soweto, the power outages there. Some of them, partly blamed to cable theft. So all those issues are there. You look at the traffic lights that you see that are sometimes not working in Africa's richest, city, that is Johannesburg. That's what you tend to find, and that's a big challenge as well. You look at the levels of corruption in our municipalities in the country. You see that there's a big challenge there. But what I'm noticing, though, is that I sense that there is very much little kind of reaction from our citizens in our municipalities. There has been there and then, people sort of mobilizing to push back against any efficiencies, corruption, lack of service delivery in our places. But I don't think we've seen that momentum, people standing up to say that, there is lack of accountability here. There is lack of service delivery. We are not getting back, as Graham did highlight, that really what we are paying, the services we are getting, they are not worth what we pay as taxpayers, and that's a big challenge that we face now. These municipal elections, I believe, are one of the most important in the post 1994 South Africa, in the sense that we are really at a crossroads when you look at the levels of service delivery, the levels of unemployment, the levels. I believe that it begins in our communities on how do we really reboot our economy in the country. And you can see that those challenges that are still there on the ground, that there is much work to be done. And people need to come out to say that we want our communities to be governed better. We want accountability, which at this point, really, we are not seeing. And that's a very, very big challenge that we face in the country. And I do believe that what we need at this point is really to have leaders who will put the interests of citizens first than their political interests. Because we've seen that in South Africa, where people are basically doing things for the purpose of either accumulating votes or seeking re-election, without really putting the interests of ordinary citizens first. And that's a big challenge that we face. And I think if, as voters, we go out there and say that those who have mismanaged our communities over the past 3 years or so, it's time we say to them, well, we are putting other people who will do what needs to be done to move the country to move the country forward. I see municipalities as a very big reflection of the country, of the country's, whether it's lack of governance, of the country's management, and of the country's basically progress when it comes to economic opportunities. Because if municipalities aren't getting it right, are mismanaging the taxpayers' funds, there is nepotism, as Akram did point out, nepotism, politically affiliated appointments that take place. If you have those things that are basically happening on the ground, then the country is doomed, because a country begins in municipalities, and then things go up into provincial and then level, and then at a national level. So if you lack that very strong accountability on the ground, where people have to experience what it is to be a South African, then you have a big program. So I look forward to the Q&A of this session, which I think, as you said, Cathy, it comes 2 days before the election. It's a very important discussion to have as to how do we as citizens sort of shape our communities going forward. And part of how we vote on Monday will reflect on how serious we are when it comes to holding our leaders accountable. So then I'll give it back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Phumlani. Let me then invite next onto the platform, Ayanda Khoza. I'm not seeing his picture, but I believe he is on, and he will just weigh in on the subject of holding municipalities and municipal officials accountable. Hi, Ayanda.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Well, I think this is quite a very big and complex discussion. This year we conducted public meetings, which we called listening to people meetings. And one of the key issues that was coming out of those meetings, because we had different meetings in different wards, but key issues that were coming from those meetings, you had people who were saying, we don't know who our councillor is. And you would think it's a joke. and this is their last term. It's a 5th year. So you've got people in the township that have never seen their councillors, don't know their councillors. They have no memory of who their councillors is. And the question that arises, but do you attend IDP meetings? And the response is IDP meetings are not for the introduction of these councillors. People were also complaining that it's also not a space to engage with these officials and councillors. We just go to these IDP meetings to be told what the local government is going to do. When are they going to do it? More of a space to control or to contain our anger and frustrations. But it's quite a very disrespectful arrangement. There's absolute lack of respect in how the meeting is conducted. And some of the issues that comes out of the report, we can send you the report, is how the party has eroded the power of the people. That people don't feel that they have power anymore, but the power rests within the factional politics and battles of the party, not with the people anymore. So it's all about the party. So this has led to what we refer to as a trust deficit between the ordinary citizens of our municipality and their councillors, which clearly tells you that they are not accountable to this. You've got councillors that are not accountable to communities as required by law, but councillors who are accountable to a party. So a party has substituted the will of the people. The party has substituted the power of the people. The party has completely replaced the people. It's all about the party. You've got a ruling party that puts the party first and not the people. They don't even put our country first. It's all about the party first, not the country, not our municipalities, not the people. So we don't know, or we don't have accountability. The last point, as I'm concluding, I'm just throwing in those ideas. The last point, as I'm concluding, we had a court case. We collected about 22 signatures out of 23 people who voted in 2016. We went to court to have this municipality dissolved, and the court ruled in our favor. We were armed with about 22,000 signatures of people who said this municipality must be dissolved. But guess what? The provincial leadership of the ANC, of about 30 people, takes a decision. None of them resides in Makanda or in Makanda. They take a decision to contest the court decision. As we speak, the matter is before the Supreme Court of Appeal. In taking the decision, there is no consultation. They don't come to us. They don't engage with us. They just took the unilateral decision and go to court and challenge. They lose the appeal, and Judge Stretch makes a very sketching judgment to say, for you to have the guts to appeal this judgment, you must hang your heads in shame. Unfortunately, our politicians are shameless. They lose the judgment, they go to the Supreme Court of Appeal. If you remember, recently we had a shutdown in Junior in Makanda. We said Premier Oscar Mabuyane must come. He's the Premier of the Eastern Cape. Must come to Makanda and explain to us why did he oppose the decision. He never came. Instead of coming and address the citizens of the city, he sends the police to shoot us. We engage the mayor. We say, call your premier, and the mayor calls the police to shoot at us. Absolutely. There is nowhere where you can make these politicians accountable. Whether at the IDP level, whether through the protest, they've just literally closed all the platform that you can use to demand accountability and to make them accountable. That is the frustration of these communities. That is why our society, our communities are in flames today, because you've got shameless politicians that are corrupt, that are thieving, who have stopped caring about people.
Ayanda, thank you. Thank you so much for those opening remarks, and also just for sharing the experience that you've been having in the conversations and the work you're doing with different communities. One of the things that you have mentioned, and I think it's come up in some of the previous conversations we've had, and it's about the access and the extent to which, when we tell citizens to hold politicians accountable, the extent to which that is realistically possible. So, what are the actual tools that communities have at their disposal to be able to do that? Or is what Ayanda is saying frustrating the ability of ordinary citizens to hold whoever is forming part of their councils and therefore the leadership in their municipalities accountable? Graham, I want you maybe to come in and just weigh in on that issue, because if somebody like Ayanda is saying political parties are making it practically impossible for people to get involved, then that of course means that there's very little recourse that is available to people.
Yeah, I think I even got word from a group of independent candidates in Buffalo Municipality who are running, and they're contesting these current elections, and they were complaining of harassment, bullying, and intimidation by ANC candidates. And it's unfortunate to have to point fingers at the ANC more so than any other party, because the fact is that the ANC is in government. But I think this highlights the issue that I was discussing in my introduction, that the problem here is that we've got no separation between party and its politics and public services, which should be independent. I would agree with what Ayanda said about a trust deficit. There seems to be a complete disconnect, and maybe even a loss of hope within the South African public in the ability of our governance structures to give us what not just what we need, but what the Constitution obliges our governance structures to provide us with in terms of basic services and social transformation. We can even look to the instance of the mining project that's in Phumlani, which has been able to prevent a mining project from going ahead. For the last 20 years, they've been fighting against a mining project which seeks to make use of community-held land. They are clearly in defiance of the project, and Gwede Mantashe wants it to go ahead. This is just another instance of our government completely disregarding the will of the people and what people are actually asking for. So I think the question we should be asking is how do we. I think the question we should be asking is not how do citizens respond to a lack of accountability. I think what we should be asking is how do we solve the problem of accountability. I think I think it's more effective to approach it from a broader sense like this, where we say how do we solve this issue so that there is resolution across the country, than to expect independent groups in each and every defunct municipality across South Africa to each have to go through all of the work in trying to hold their governance structures to account. Ayanda can tell us firsthand how difficult it has been to get their instance to court, to receive a judgment that was actually in their favor. And as he said, the provincial government then just appeals the High Court ruling. It's as the judge said, it's so bold of them, because they're actually the ANC provincial government is actually contesting clarity that the South African Constitution provides. Here's what we are constitutionally entitled to receive. In Makana, it was not provided. There's no discussion about whether that's the case. If anyone were to go there, go to Makana municipality, you would understand the nickname of the town, the pothole, because that's basically all that there is. That the government, as Ayanda was saying, that the government can oppose a high court judgment that was so clearly correct, just shows the level of disconnect between the government, our governance structures, and the will of the people. So this is why my position is, I don't think we should be expecting people across the country to try to use whatever mechanism they have to hold government to account, because they are already doing so. We've got community organizations who are organizing and trying to have engagements with local government, but the municipalities don't come to the meetings. The municipalities don't want to engage with these groups. And then when you have a court case like the one that Ayanda has been instrumental in, the result, well, it's still pending, but it just gets frustrated. And then we only have elections as another mechanism every 4 years. So I feel like people are trying to hold government to account. Across the country, people are using the mechanisms that are there, and it's not working. So I think we need legislation to solve this problem. The problem is that we need to separate the ANC, or the ruling party, from the level of service delivery. That is the only way to ensure that the people that provide the services are actually qualified to do so, and that they have accountability to the people who voted for them to be there. The ANC or the leading government should provide policy-based direction in terms of what the services should be, but the people who actually do that job should be employees of the civil service who are not attached to a political party.
Phumlani, let me come to you. Yeah.
Yes, just sorry, Cathy. I just want to pick up from here. There is what I can call the reality that we need to face as we discuss here, and that is, these politicians. Ayanda has said they are shameless when he made his statement. These politicians, they will, for political purposes, push back against any kind of sort of processes or procedures that are being taken by people in an effort to hold them accountable. They are going to push back. They will go through the court process for appealing purposes, which is what Graham and I've said. And the intent is for them to basically protect their political image, right? So they will attempt to do this. They will do this for their own political interests, and that's a big challenge. Now, if we as citizens in our communities, we face such a challenge, for example, in a specific term before the election, we go to courts, we try and we protest and all that, and all those mechanisms, we still feel that we are dissatisfied with how our leaders are responding to our needs. And then the last resort in a democracy is the voting process that will take place on Monday, right? Because as much as there's something that we need to always remember here, Cathy, and that is, in a democratic state, the voter, whether it's in national elections, whether it's in local government elections, the voter is the most powerful player, right? If we as ordinary citizens were exploiting every mechanism on the ground, and we are still, not achieving what is of our satisfaction, and then the last resort is at least to have an opportunity to bring about or to bring the change in the municipal elections. So I'm trying to say, for people like Ayanda, who have been really wrestling with these politicians on the ground.
Sorry, Cathy, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. Apologies. It looks like we've lost Phumlani there in terms of the conversation, but I'm sure he will be able to rejoin us soon, and we will give him an opportunity just to complete his thoughts. You know, Ayanda, one of the suggestions that has been made before, and Graham talks about having overarching legislation that helps deal with the issue of accountability specifically. Last week, oh no, actually earlier this week on Monday, Dr. Tracy Ledger said what we actually need is an overhaul of the local governance system, because the current system as it is simply not working and it is not fit for purpose. I wonder where you stand in terms of those suggestions, and if there's anything different that you think would be more effective, or which of those two would be the immediate intervention that could bring better results.
Cathy, is it directed to me?
No, I had directed it to Ayanda because I was still waiting for you to rejoin. I'll come back to you now, Phumlani.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Cathy. Well, I think there are three issues. One issue that I want to raise before I come to your question. It is not easy. What happened at Ekolobeni with Amatiba crisis, when they used their democratic right to say no to mining, when they took a decision to also protect their environment, to protect their livelihoods, their leader, Comrade Bazooka, was gunned down and killed. We know a number of activists around the country who have stood up to demand accountability, all those groupings. We know they've been the subject of threats and intimidation by politicians. So I concur, I really concur with an idea that say we need to overhaul the whole system of local government. It is not working. Well, there are quite a number of reasons that it is not working. In one instance, it could be there is money, but it is spent. The manner, I mean, you've got over 48 million rents in Makana municipality that you refer to as a wasteful expenditure. It's disgusting. When you've got people that need water, as I'm talking to you, this is the third day. Where I stay in Fingo, we don't have water. But you've got an audit report that will say 48 million rand wasteful expenditure. That's number one. Number two, you've got a problem. The price of a borehole, it's between 120,000 and 150 for the community. But you've got Makana municipality that went and buy borehole for a price of 4 million rand. It's ridiculous. So you've got, so I'm saying you've got, in one instant, you don't have money. Yet you don't have money, yet the manner in which it is spent, it's to enrich this politician. But again, you've got a problem of a budget, where the total budget of the national government, this municipality can only access not more than 9%. You've got a provincial government that we don't know what is the role of the provincial government. Because even when we are protesting for housing, despite the fact that this housing, it is the competency, of a provincial government. But when we want these houses, when we demonstrate, we go to these city halls, because this is the closest sphere of government to us as the black working class people. So I agree to say you need to overhaul this system, but over and above, you need to have this conversation. You can't say it's local government after the first, whoever wins. These conversations, these webinars, conversations, discussions on accountability will fade away. We need to continue and make sure that we put pressure on these municipalities. We've got this tendency of saying, no, we don't need passive citizens, we need active citizens. But immediately after the vote, we keep quiet. And I'm happy to say we've got a program with Rosa Luxemburg Foundation on participatory budgeting. And it has got to work so that the work that we've been doing, we are able to continue that work. And in making sure that these municipalities are accountable to its citizens. Thank you, Cathy. Sorry for taking longer.
No problem at all, Ayanda. So Phumlani, I'm going to give you a chance just to finish the thoughts that you're still sharing with us before you got cut off. And perhaps you can also just build on this question of where to from now, because if the system is seen as fundamentally the problem, do we bring in legislation? Do we overhaul the system? I see a suggestion here from Jim Powell, who's talking about contracts of accountability between the candidates and the voters before elections. Is that perhaps the way to go? Sounds a bit like performance appraisals of sorts, that, you know, we'll have this as a legally binding document. I don't know if it will be reduced to just semantics in a country like ours.
Well, I mean, that will be, again, the overhauling of the system, Cathy, if you were to implement something of that sort, to be very significant. But I think the idea there is basically to say there has to be the direct accountability between the people on the ground and the leaders. And what I was saying earlier was that really, even though there may be mechanisms where we fail, as Ayanda has been sort of describing his experiences, at least we do have these sort of the elections that took place for us to bring the different type of people to see how they do. And, you know, as Ayanda is saying, that it can't be, we can't just, this is not, it's not really about next week, the election day. It's about how do we, after that, have this continuous engagement on how do we really put in the mechanisms and systems that will at the end of the day, you know, uphold the interests of the people on the ground. Graham has been speaking about the idea of separating really the service delivery from politicians. Again, if you were to really put in such systems, it would really, you know, have to go through sort of a very massive structural change that we would see some pushback again from the people who basically will have to be held accountable in those systems.
Sure.
So
Yes? Phumlani, I just want to come in there. I mean, must then we be afraid of change, or of even pushing for some kind of reform, because there's this expectation of the pushback that will be experienced? Because if we let things stay the way that they are now, the kind of repercussions we'll be living with 50 years from now are going to be possibly the worst case scenario. But if we start pushing for reforms now, perhaps in the next 10 years, we'll be at a better place than where we are.
Okay, so with respect to that, my position is we have to push. We have to push if we want change in the country. If we want our communities to run better, then we cannot say, well, these guys are they don't want to be held accountable, they are fighting us, we are therefore going to lay back. No, we can't. We need to push for the changes that will benefit us at the end of the day. And you used the word, you said some legislation changes, Cathy. And at the end of the day, how the country is governed, there will be, at some point, some legislative requirements that will need to go in place. And if we have to go that far to push for a system that would really represent people on the ground and empower them than politicians. Then we have to go as far as that in terms of legislation. So we have to push, Cathy. We have to push against the leaders, so that we hold them accountable.
Graham, you've been sitting and quietly listening into what the other panelists are saying. I'll give you a chance to also add to the contribution, and just to all the participants that are joining this conversation today. I'm going to ask that please you can post your engagements in that chat group as this conversation continues, because it will be also good to hear from you in terms of some of the solutions that are being put on the table. Will they actually work? Do you believe that they have the power to work? And I would really want the second part of this conversation to hone in on, because I think it's been established now that it is very difficult for communities to hold politicians accountable, especially after they have been voted into power, governance, whichever way you want to look at it. So what impact does this have on whether or not people vote and the kind of decisions they make when they do vote? Because if you look at part of what has been largely reported on in different communities, you've got a lot of people that say, well, I don't see the point of voting because I'm not seeing the result of voting. So why must I vote if what I'm voting for, I've been waiting to see the result of over years and years and years, and that is not happening? Graham?
Hi. Oh, okay, cool. I'm on. Yeah, I wanted to respond to something Phumlani had said about basically who we have providing our services. What if we have a change in governance and the next party behaves also in an unaccountable way? Do we then wait another 4 years to vote the next one in? Because the problem with that is the amount of changeover that has to happen when you bring in a new set of councillors and officials because they're party-based. There's all of this disconnect. It's such an inefficient system. We shouldn't be here when we go into elections. If I look at all of the campaign messages from what the parties want us to believe they're going to do, the only party who's getting across what their policy basis is the EFF. All of the other parties are campaigning on we're going to get it done, or fix the mess, or we build better communities. That's not policy. Voting is should be based on policy. The direction that your government will take in terms of social needs and providing us with the transformation. We shouldn't be voting for services. That should be there to begin with. The services should be in place, and the party that receives the most votes provides the direction of what those services should be and how they should take effect. So I think where we go from here is, yes, legislation is a complicated and it's a long process. But I don't think that should put us off. But the other mechanism that we can look at is to take the UPM against Makana municipality case further. Sorry, I'm just referring to my notes. What the government and the responding municipality argued against UPM's argument was that if the High Court were to find in UPM's favor, if the High Court were to say, yes, there has been a constitutional violation here, the municipality has acted in basically there is maladministration. On this basis, we are directing that the municipality is to be dissolved. That was the High Court's order. And the respondent's argument against that was that if this applies in Makana, then the precedent can be used around the country, and suddenly we have a floodgates argument where in any municipality which is facing the same or similar set of circumstances as in Makana municipality, where there is blatant maladministration and services are not being provided as the constitution requires, the Makana judgment can be applied to in a court there, and the same ruling happens. We actually need this to happen. We need the High Court's judgment to be upheld by the Supreme Court, and it will be, because it's based on a clear set of laws that our constitution provide for South Africans. There's no debate about the matter. If the Supreme Court were to find in the government's favor, which is unlikely, I hope that UPM will take the matter to the Constitutional Court, because there is no doubt that the Constitutional Court will not find in UPM's favor. And then on that basis, we may be able to look at something where now we have a High Court ruling that has been upheld in the Constitutional Court, which says the ruling was based on our constitutional rights and the constitutional obligation of our governance structures to indeed provide those rights. So now we take this Makana case, the ruling, and we go further. We apply to the Constitutional Court, and we use the myriad instances of service delivery failure across South Africa to back up the claim. And we ask the Constitutional Court to declare that the involvement of politics in the level of service delivery is obstructing South Africans from receiving constitutional rights and obligations, because it has been proven that party-led local governance structures are incapable of providing what the Constitution says governments are obliged to provide. And that will provide us with the mechanism to ensure that we have accountability.
You know, Graham, as you're talking, you're reminding me of an interesting statement that I've heard. I just forget who exactly made it, but it's been reiterated by some of the political parties who are saying that local government elections are not about ideology. And this is particularly in the context of coalition governments. And they're saying, well, it's not about ideology. So therefore, we can have two parties that are, diametrically opposed in as far as ideology is concerned, but that are very much opening the door to working together in local government. And yet, when I was listening to you earlier, you were emphasizing the extent to which political parties have not been selling a message based on their policies, but rather just on what they will do and what they will fix. So are we then saying that when it does come to local government, ideology, political party ideology is perhaps not uppermost on the agenda, but that rather it is about services? Or how do the two coexist and correlate? So I'm throwing all of these ideas at you so that you can just try and weigh in there, because ultimately it does speak to fundamentally whether or not we need local government in its current framework.
I think the problem is that even though yes, policy is more on a provincial or a national government level. That's not to say that service delivery is not politicized. I don't want to refer to specific examples because they're all contestable and it's complicated. But maybe just one thing that I can point to is the breakdown of coalitions when there is a difference of opinion or some political issue. So I don't think that our parties have demonstrated that they are actually mature enough to run effective coalitions at a local level.
Fair enough. Phumlani, do you want to come in there? And
Yeah.
then I'll come to you, Ayanda, after Phumlani.
Yeah, because you've raised something that has been on my mind, Cathy. The idea, this thing of coalitions. We are entering the phase in South Africa's democracy. The next phase in politics is coalition politics. And we've seen over the past 4 years how that, over the past few years, how coalitions have sort of faced challenges where there were coalitions in various cities in the country. And for me, I tend to, you know, to differ a bit from Graham in the sense that I think that when it comes to, our local communities or cities, local governments, I think that is where, we sort of, it has to be about service delivery. And then the overarching, policy ideas. I think, because I want to see, is my road outside? Is it working properly? I want to see, are the traffic lights? Are they there? Am I getting water? Right? Am I getting electricity? Is my community safe? That's what we're looking for. And it tends to be more about that when it comes to municipalities that it's about service delivery. And that is where now the challenge for our leaders is to say, okay, how do we, as the EFF and the DA and the ANC, how do we sort of achieve something better when it comes to service delivery? In other words, there will be things that we'll need to agree upon so we can deliver the services for our people. So it's the coalitions will be a difficult phase for South Africa because of political interests. Sometimes they will collapse and they will cause some chaos in our cities. But I think at the end of the day, really, I tend to differ a bit with Graham in the sense that I'm saying actually it's about service delivery in our communities or local governments.
So Phumlani, given that, that's also part of your view, do you think, again, we've had the suggestion, and I think it's Ntate Teritzelani, former commissioner, he's now with his own independent electoral company, ISA, Managed Elections Management Systems. He was saying that what we actually need is an independent body. So along the lines of the CCMA, that would play a role of arbitration and mediation for different coalitions that are formed in the country. So effectively, like what you're saying, where political parties have a fallout, whether it's 6 months or a year into their term of office, that it doesn't necessarily result in a complete collapse of the council and a complete collapse of the delivery of services, but they go to this body that will be able to arbitrate on those issues independently. Do you think that would be a direction to go in?
It's not a bad direction. It's what would challenge that body will be the idea. What would be the questions would arise around its legitimacy. In the decisions it make, its independence. Is it independent enough, that body? Those questions would arise, especially in the context of South Africa, where really people tend to make noise around our institutions. That would be one of the institutions. I don't know if that would form part of the Chapter 9, part of one of the Chapter 9 institutions, but people would question around its legitimacy and the decisions it makes, and whether those decisions, by the way, Cathy, whether those decisions can be challenged at the Constitutional Court. So those are another, or is it, would that commission or that body would be the final decision maker in a I doubt that would happen. Everything that it does will still be questioned and be challenged even in court. So it would be a big challenge, but it's not a bad idea. It's a good idea, actually, I think.
All right, Phumlani, thanks for that. Ayanda, let me give you a chance to come back and weigh in on the conversation. I see you on the chat group, but we haven't heard from you in a bit.
All right. I think it's important that I must make an emphasis of our conversation to say elections on its own are not the alpha and omega, are not the beginning and the end. But what is important in between the elections, what becomes our role? How do we make it a point that we hold these parties, these municipalities accountable? How do we drive the interests of communities? I think to me that's quite important. Number two, I also agree with Graham. We really need to depoliticize these municipalities. It's not a problem of the problem is not only ANC, right? The problem is politics, factional battles fought in these council chambers, kleptocracy, right? Exchange of money in black plastic bags taken into these council chambers. So these council chambers must be the chambers of the people. We also need an ethical leadership. I think that's quite important. We must ask ourselves a question: can we really have leaders, right? Though I don't subscribe to the notion of a leader, but can we have municipalities? I don't like political parties, but can we have a party that can really put the interests of society at heart? That the interests of the communities, the interests of a society can be of paramount importance than the interests of a party, than the interests of individuals. So I think to me, of those political parties, I think to me that's quite important. Can we not look at Malema as a messiah or President Ramaphosa as messiah? Can we reclaim our power as people and make it a point that we are creating a society of solidarity? We are creating a municipality that is rested in the hands of the people. So I think to me, what is very key is how do we reclaim this power as Black working class communities? How do we reclaim this power? How do we make sure that this power is rested in our communities? Even those that lead us, how do we make it a point that they carry, or they are the embodiment of our needs and aspiration? They are the embodiment of an ethical society. So I think to me, those are some of the conversations that we should continue with.
You know, Ayanda, I'm listening to you speaking, and I'm thinking, it is incredibly noble to want to have leaders of that caliber. But we look at politics the world over, and there's this constant tension of interest between politics and power. And by power, I also just am referencing capital. And at a local level, that is seen quite extensively, because the politicians are not only acting in their own interest, but sometimes they're making certain decisions to further the interests of business or of capital that is involved or has interests in a particular area. How do you deal with that? Because that tension will always be there.
Well, I think as individuals, we don't subscribe to individuals that are saints, that are pure. But I think it's important. It's important for us as individuals to always keep on checking ourselves. We commit mistakes. We are not, but I think it's quite important to even go to an extent of holding ourselves accountable as individuals before we can hold others quite accountable. That's very key. That's number one. But key number two, we need to show serious commitment in fighting corruption in this country, but also in the world. As I'm saying, I mean, we don't have water simply because someone decided to be corrupt. We don't have water because simply somebody decided that the group of individuals took a decision that they will not buy a borehole at a price of 180. They'll buy a borehole at a price of 4 million rand, and nothing is being done because they want to take money. As a result, as people, as human beings, we are suffering. We don't have water. You've got individuals that are depriving us water. We have sewer at our homes. We are living where we live. There are just dumping sites all over because it is a decision of corrupt individuals. So I think as individuals, we also have a responsibility to keep ourselves on check. But very key, as we are saying, put the interests of society, put the interests of humanity first, not our interest to. I mean, to me, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. How do you drive even an ML, a car of about 3 million rand in Grahamstown, where there are potholes? How do you do that in a sea of poverty, right? So these are the individuals that must be, what do you call it, incarnation or resurrection. So this conversation has to go on, has to go. We must speak truth to the powers, but also we've got to have this conversation amongst ourselves as well. We must be quite uncomfortable the moment people say, I mean, UPM is not an organization of Puritans. People must also be able to engage UPM itself quite critically. There's absolutely nothing wrong because we are part of the society.
Thanks for that, Ayanda. And of course, the hour has just flown by. We must now get ready to start wrapping up this conversation. I'm not sure if we've lost Phumlani or not. I'm certainly not seeing him. But Graham, let me give you a chance
to hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you. Just hang on. I'll come to you shortly. But Graham, let me give you a chance perhaps to give us your concluding remarks on this conversation.
Thanks very much. I'm not sure if I'm connected.
Your picture has gone off, Graham.
Okay. Let's see if I can reconnect. Or you can just use my photo. I'll stick with the photograph for now.
No problem. We can still hear you loud and clear.
I think ultimately our problem is one of vertical integration, which ultimately is a type of monopoly where you have perhaps a producer of a product that might be harmful or potentially harmful, and that producer is putting it out there, and the body who tells us whether or not that product is harmful is actually controlled by the producer. I think we're seeing the same problem in our political system, where we're meant to be able to look to government if we need to say we're not getting service delivery. But the problem we have is that when we tell government we're not getting service delivery, the people who are not giving us the services are government. It's government looking after itself, because our entire civil service basically is linked to whoever the majority-led party is. So with regard to coalition politics, I think, yes, perhaps we are entering that phase in our democracy, but we're unlike places like in the northern hemisphere, where there's a lot more homogeneity in ideas and in their societies. We're still a very racially and class-based divided society. We're still dealing with the legacy of apartheid, and our dominant parties at the moment all have diametrically opposed ideologies. So I feel our parties are too far apart from each other to actually come together in a functional way. And ultimately, I would just conclude by saying that for South Africa to see efficient service delivery and accountability in our governance structures, we need to have an independent civil service.
Thank you so much for that, Graham. Persimungalo on the chat group agrees with you. He says, I agree with the panel members. This is on depoliticizing the public service and separating politics from the administration. Phumlani, let me give you a chance to give your concluding remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. I don't want to be demotivating to people about these elections, because I sense from the conversation we've had that there is this questioning of whether. are elections really helpful? So I don't want to really. I do believe that we've got to be. We need to come out. Part of what has been the problem in South Africa over the past years is what is called the voter apathy. People losing interest in engaging in their democratic, in their democratic process. I think these conversations about how do we restructure our local governance systems. Yes, they need to take place. We need to look for the ideas that will sort of bring about efficiencies, but also I think that people need to come out and really bring a change, and for them to come out and voice their and voice their dissatisfaction or satisfaction in their communities. It's very important that they go to the polling stations and make that difference. I don't want them to sit at home and say, well, nothing is changing anyway. I mean, at least go there, change, try and make change in terms of who leads you in your community, and then continue with the discussions of how do you restructure our governance process, which Graham and Ayanda have been putting those ideas. Then let's continue talking about those things. So really, I want people to come out and make a difference with their vote, not stay at home.
Thank you so much for that, Phumlani. Because yes, despite the systemic challenges, at the end of the day, that vote is still the best shot, one of the best shots that we have in terms of making a true change where governance is concerned. Ayanda, let me come to you and also give you a minute to give us your concluding remarks.
I think, to me, as fellow panelists have put this point, there are systematic issues that really needs to be challenged, but there are issues that we must deal with urgently. But as I was saying, I want to make an emphasis of this point that we need to have more of these conversations after elections. We need to make sure that we keep these municipalities, we make sure that they account, they rest in the hands of our people, because I believe the people of this country do have resilience. It's quite encouraging how everyone has stood up and have taken this discussion quite seriously. So it is my belief, if we have done so, we'll be able to make a change. And also the programs like participatory budgeting that we have entered into with Rosa Luxemburg Foundations are quite important, as Graham was saying, that these movements and some of these programs ought to be supported. So yeah, it's all that I could say. Struggle goes on.
Thank you so much for that, Ayanda. To you, to Graham, and to Phumlani for being part of this conversation this afternoon. We truly, truly appreciate your expertise and your insights. And I hope that, like Phumlani was saying, at the end of the day, we don't feel discouraged enough to not go out and vote, whether it's the special voting over the next 2 days, or if it's in the election on the 1st of November. A big thank you to the Mail and Guardian, and of course to Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung for having put together these conversations. As you know, I understand just how important they are, and I couldn't agree more. We're entering a different phase of our politics, and I think if there's anything we can take out of the number of independent candidates that we have contesting this election, is that this country continues to be alive with possibility, and South Africans care about their future. They care about getting involved in politics, and it's about making sure that the kind of environment that we have allows that equal platform for participation, and that indeed it is the will of the people. It is the people that govern at the end of the day. That's where we'll leave it for today, but over 10 minutes over, I think, in terms of the time that has been allocated for the discussion. But it's certainly been a pleasure being with you all.